Hello and welcome back to the Schooner Pod. I'm your host, Bobby Howard. With me today, we've got, as usual, Jameson Maxwell and Ty Lee. And folks, it's the throes of the off season. We don't have a lot of content. And, frankly, with this being the last year in the Big 12, we decided to take some time to say goodbye to the members OU is leaving behind. We don't care about the new guys. Nobody cares about BYU, UCF. We have no history with them. But we wanted to take some time to really reflect on the history, my type of subject with each of the remaining Big 12 schools. So this is the first in a series we're calling Bye Bye Big 12. Probably not as emotional as the Pokemon episode Bye Bye Butterfree.
I was thinking the exact same thing whenever you put that out. I was like, I wonder if he's making a Pokemon reference here, and I'm all in.
Well, Jameson, you probably haven't seen the thumbnail, but there's definitely a really sad Butterfree-ish sunset in the background. So it's definitely a nod to Bye Bye Butterfree. But I also got to say, hat tip to the great legendary Red Dirt Sport, who is doing a very similar thing on his Patreon. Definitely give them a check out. We're doing different things. This is going to be different. It's not a direct.
Where we got the idea.
It's not a direct ripoff. It's just a really good idea, and we're going
not much to do.
There's
really everyone's going to have the same ideas.
It's Steal from the Sheeb season. I apologize, Red Dirt, if you're listening to this, but all the credit to you on this. Great idea. We're going to go a little bit more in depth than he does, but he does his takes, his stuff on his Patreon. Give him a sub. He is absolutely he just so valuable. That Patreon money, $1 sub to that Patreon. He's killer. Give that a check out. Give that Sheeb a check out. But so look, let's go ahead and start out with the team that frankly has been the biggest pain in our ass in the entire Big 12, the Kansas State Wildcats. We're going to kick this series off with them because it seems fair. Jameson, before we really get before we kick this thing off,
kick them out of here. Kick the Kansas State out of this podcast. That's what I know you want to say.
Just a couple thoughts. Just a couple thoughts on the K-State Wildcats.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Ty's going to agree with this too. But it's the first thing. I guess it's all human nature is we just go to the negatives. Not a lot of the time we think of the good games in terms of the ones we blew them out and did the business. We kind of think about the negative times. And obviously the one I feel like y'all are going to remember the most is 2014. Like that 2014 game is just etched into my memory, but I feel like I made it out to be worse than it even was. Like the Honeycutt missed extra point, even though it was a 1-point game after that. We had like 10 minutes left in the game after that. And we fizzled out for the rest of the fourth quarter. And I feel like I've remodeled that in my head to think it was near the very end of the game and Honeycutt just blew it.
Well, and also with hindsight, that team was doomed. But Ty, your thoughts on K-State before we dive into it?
So I have a couple thoughts. One, that 2014 one, I remember the day before and the day after, but I don't quite remember that game, thankfully. But yeah, so some of you might be saying, why are we doing a remembrance to the Big 12? The season hasn't even started yet. Why aren't they saving this for next offseason? Hard to talk today. We don't want to be looking backwards next offseason. So next offseason, I think we talked about in preview for the viewers for next year. Stay tuned. We'll be doing a looking forward into the SEC. So we're getting our in memory, whatever you want to call it, out of the way. So that's what we're doing. And when I think about K-State, I think about all the stuff that, I mean, this is one of the programs where weirdly enough, we're more we're very interlinked with this K-State program, and we'll talk about it. But I mean, Bob Stoops came from K-State. Brent Venables came not directly from K-State, but he came directly from K-State to OU the first time he was at OU. So there's just a lot of ties between these two programs that are far beyond the ties that we have to other programs within the Big 12, and we'll get into. Obviously, we have tremendous ties with Oklahoma State and with Texas, but I think out of the remaining Big 12 right now, K-State probably number 3 on the most ties to Oklahoma, weirdly enough, and has been since our lifetimes, mid-90s to we'll include all the 90s to current day. I mean, they've been a pretty competitive within this series as well. So that's why we're starting out with this K-State team. And when I think about K-State, I think about just the tremendous ties with people, with Bob Stoops and with Brent Venables. And I know that's kind of weird, but I think
how nice of you, Ty, to think of the positives. That's I'm so proud of you.
I'm talking about Brent Venables. How is that talking about a positive?
Okay. A little bit of a hedge right there. Bobby, do you think of positives or negatives with this?
I don't know.
You're a positive person because you're so nostalgic. You're the most nostalgic person I know. So you're probably like, oh, I remember all the great games. And...
Not only that, but you know me as like a guy who's been a big K-State truther, and finally it came.
Oh yes.
But I gotta say, there's a lot of positives in the series. I know we obviously think about the Snyder era and the amount of trouble they gave us, but I'm gonna do this. And Jameson, you're gonna bang your head against the wall here because of structure. But we're going to do a rundown of OU and Kansas State's history. So I'm going to start this off. It's going to be very, very fast. Don't worry, Jameson. It's going to be fine. Little pre-Big 12 history. The teams have been in the same conference for 103 years, dating back to the early Missouri Valley Conference, which later became the Big 8. And while you might think this has been a close series, it's not. Overall, the series record is 77, 22, and 4. Pre-Bill Snyder, Kansas State football was one of the worst programs in college sports. People forget that. This is how bad K-State was against OU. They only beat Oklahoma twice from 1937 to 1992. So pretty unreal stuff. However, Bill Snyder would then more than double that win record with a 5-game winning streak from 1993 to 1997, which brought us right into the Big 12 era. Kansas State's Big 12 record against the Sooners is, the Sooners are 14-8 against K-State, which makes K-State the best, the best team against OU among the legacy Big 12 teams, among the ones remaining. So Kansas State, while historically, if we're talking about Big 8, all that, which we're not really diving into with all this podcast, not great, but once they hit the 90s, once they hit the Snyder era, they've been a pretty formidable foe for the Sooners. So in general,
these Zoomers talk about Big 8 anyways.
No.
We're not Zoomers.
We are very much millennials, which I guess is, at least we're not Zoomers, folks. At least we're not Zoomers. But no, so Kansas State in the Big 12 era has been an awesome opponent. I don't think we've always appreciated them in that way. I don't think whenever K-State comes to town, we're like, oh, here comes Kansas State, big game. And we probably should have, because they always snuck up on us, beat us a lot of times. But really, you're right, James. So there's a lot of positives to look at. There's that 55-0 win in 2015. There's a lot of really positive moments. The 2000 Big 12 championship. They have some good wins over K-State. Just the losses that sneak up that really stick in your mind a little bit more.
I have a fun fact, Bobby, that you sort of led me into perfectly. I was just kind of saving it for when it came up, and this is a perfect time to mention it. Funny enough, this is funny if you're into college football, but interestingly enough, and this is a real nerdy statistic, like I said, but the record is basically it's as close you can get to as the same, or it's as close to as same as you can get to. I don't know why I can't speak today, but K-State versus OU in Kansas, OU was 39-11-1, and then in Norman, OU was 37-10-3, which is very, very close over the span of however many times we have met, close to 100 times. So it's kind of interesting that, and like you mentioned, Bill Snyder cleaned that up tremendously for Kansas State, and they've continued to sort of clean that up, like we talked about, 1990 to now. Tremendous change in that series history, but I think very interesting that the record is sort of as close you can get as evened out.
Fits the bill. Weird, yeah. It's not really weird, because if you think of like the recent memory, like 4 of the 5 past Kansas State wins over Oklahoma were in Norman. So like, and we were all of us were there for the majority of all of those. So it kind of like clicks whenever I hear you say that time, like that makes sense. Going back to, I guess when I was saying 4 of the last 5, so that would be in 2012, whenever they beat us. And then we beat them in 2013, but then in 2014, they turned around and beat us again in Norman. That's back-to-back years in Norman. And then we lost again 2020 and then in 2022. 2 back-to-back years in Norman where we lost to Kansas State.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, and OU doesn't lose in Norman that often. Kansas State holds a lot of wins in Norman. And it would be interesting to split it out. K-State wins in Norman versus everybody else. They clearly are the ones who've won more than anybody, but it's like even against the field, they match up well.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing, because we're doing sort of non-organic, but just a thought that I had that came up when I think about OU versus Kansas State, and this is sad to mention on a pod where we're talking about OU moving to a new conference, but when I think of OU versus Kansas State, I think of a true, sort of pure college football. It's not necessarily a big national brand versus big national. It's not something that draws the national TV attention normally. Obviously there's games here and there, like we mentioned, 2000s, where it's an extremely relevant game, but it's just a regional game. It's drivable. People can make that trip on a weekend, no matter where the game is at. Either way, Bobby, I know you're a big goer of games in Kansas. And I just think it's college football, just the regional old school sport when I think about it. And sad to see it go. Probably more sad to see Kansas State go than many other schools, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, because I feel like I've been conditioned to think like you said, Ty, like this is always going to be a tough nose, hard battle. And I think Bobby said it great. There's also a lot of good memories, and obviously with the 2000 Big 12 championship. But I think like the best moment on a kind of like feeling of relief to kind of get this monkey off our back of Kansas State was that 2015 game, 55-0. Baker Mayfield had 5 touchdowns in the first half and just completely shut him out. 55-0. Easy. And that was a great, great feeling as an OU fan. It felt like that we had finally gotten over the hump, and Kansas State was this team that kind of had our number, which is just super weird to say out loud at that time. But they've continued to be like a thorn in our side. And having teams like that to keep you humble, even if they're not highly ranked that season, even if they're in the 20s, like the teens, or not ranked at all, the OU football team should know, like every single time you play Kansas State, like it's going to be a dogfight. And I think that's good, preparing you for the postseason in college football to have teams like that.
And I think it's one of the biggest annoyances I've had with OU is I don't think they've treated it like it should be a dogfight.
No, there's a lot of time.
They never seem prepared for K-State, and it's always annoying, home or away. And that 2015 game was so cathartic, not just because we lost to them the year before, but we were fresh off of the loss to Texas, really embarrassing upset in 2015. So even better. There was that whole kind of weird situation where I don't know if you remember this, like OU was like stuck in the airport for hours and couldn't get to Manhattan.
Now that you say that, I do remember that. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. This is just another thing. We're just going to get hit down by this team that's got our... I remember that now that you say that.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot, but it worked out okay. So we're kind of in our best game segment. We kind of mentioned the 2000 year. We're not going to dive too deep into a couple years that we weren't really cognizant for, but I think if you have to pick a best moment against Kansas State, it was K-State at their prime, at their hype, beating them in Manhattan in Red October for one, and then beating them in that championship game in Kansas City on their home turf. Unreal performance from OU, really sprungboard them. And we talk about Red October as one of the greatest moments in OU history, having to beat Texas, K-State, and Nebraska back to back. That being the one road game, incredible stuff for OU against K-State. And Snyder was a tough guy to beat. He was tricky. He was always tricky. So I will say I think if we had to pick a high point, it had to have been 2000. Obviously had other moments. 2001 was solid, but like K-State at their prime, going in and beating them after the years we had against them, pretty solid. And then since then they were just kind of a pain in the ass because they had taken a step back. But so I think the best game is kind of settled.
Well, yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, the 2000 championship would be the best game because that's like a high stakes game.
Yeah, K-State hasn't really been that high stakes ever since. So There's that.
Other than last Big 12 championship.
And I gotta ask, guys, like, when we're talking about best, do we consider it, what's the balance between high stakes and performance? So obviously the 55-0 win was great, but a little bit more low stakes. How do you all measure a win?
So I think I'll jump into this one because I have a different. So my personal best game against K-State, and this ties into my point about OU versus K-State. I just think of classic, regional college football. It doesn't have to be nationally relevant. It doesn't have to be a big one. So my favorite win against K-State is the only win that OU has against K-State with me as a student, which is 2021. So OU abysmal record against Kansas State with me as an OU student. So I lean on that one, and I think that it just kind of depends. I think as we continue through this series, there's going to be maybe a big debate, but I don't think it has to be super, super significant because like you talked about that 2015 game against K-State where, Baker just went off. I think, not to jump ahead and not to disrespect K-State, but probably easily one of my top 3 favorite wins over Kansas was Baker Mayfield, doing his whole fiasco against Kansas. So I think when in college football, I think it depends on what you're looking for. Obviously, OU maybe looking for those nationally relevant game. That's why we're even having this discussion. But I don't think it has to be relevant or a big performance. I think it can just hold some neat significance.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
Yeah. The 2015 game will kind of be what I think of just because as OU fans, I feel like we really highly regard Baker Mayfield and his tenure almost as like one of the best, if not the best college football player to come through Oklahoma. And I understand people will have like, talk about talent versus, like player overall. There's obviously a huge conversation there, and he's not the most talented player to come through, but he can be argued to be the best Oklahoma player of all time. I can hear that argument. And that game was big because the year before, 2014, was gross at quarterback. Absolutely gross. And Trevor Knight honestly wasn't cutting it. So having that game coming out in 2015 and Baker Mayfield throwing 5 touchdowns the first half, it kind of was like a change of like what our offense was going to be. We're going to go back to the times where we have solid, really good quarterbacks. We were spoiled before that. We had maybe like a year or two those past 10 years before that of some bad quarterback play. But for the most part, we've been pretty blessed. And the 2014 was kind of a weird feeling, especially for us as young OU fans trying to get used to something like that. It just honestly was such a breath of fresh air.
Well, and I mean, we had that 2012 game where you and I were at that one, I believe, Jameson, with Colin Klein, where he wrecked OU, wrecked our season early. We'll get into best villains a little later.
Yeah, but no, please talk about all the villains because there's one for like every 3 years of Kansas State.
There's an entire family of villains, but I want to kind of focus on the Baker Mayfield point. People, I think we kind of forget a little bit his heroics in 2017 at Kansas State. Where he threw it was number 9 OU versus not a very good K-State team, but he came back, led OU all the way back, threw for 410 yards, 2 touchdowns, in a great effort. But Rodney Anderson punched in that game-winning touchdown, 147 yards and 1 touchdown. Unreal stuff. I was at that one. That was a stressful game. And I will never forget something the cameras never caught, and I kind of wish they did because it would go down in Baker Mayfield lore forever. Rodney turns the corner, scores a touchdown. Baker, in an exciting, just totally in pure excitement, pure adrenaline, sprints down and lays out the person in the Boomer mascot. Just completely lays them out. We happen to know the person in it. They got concussed, actually. So Baker accidentally concussed the mascot celebrating. So great game there in 2017. That was back when they had Alex Doughton at quarterback. So weird times. But Baker undefeated against K-State in his entire tenure at OU. So 4-0, definitely. And I think that leads into who is the biggest hero in OU K-State history? Because I think Baker might be it.
Yeah, it's Baker. I don't even have to reset what I said the past 10 minutes. It's definitely him because he made us get out of a rut there. And the thing is, we're in another rut right now. with Kansas State. So who's going to be the new hero to pop up and do what Baker Mayfield did?
Yeah, I mean, since Baker left, we beat him with Kyler, lost with Jalen, lost with Radler.
We lost 2019, 20, and 22, and then we won in 2021.
That's right. We Radler was 1-1 against him, and then we lost last year with Dylan Gabriel. So it's been dicey since then. But anyways, yeah, it's either Baker Mayfield or you could go super vintage and go with like a Josh Heupel, who led him to those two wins. But again, 2000 is 2000. It's almost like cheating. You know what I mean? To pick a 2000 type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Ty, you think it's Baker?
I don't know. Yeah, if we're going in the Big 12, no, it's got you have to go 2000. It's not super vintage. If you're going Big 12, it's got to be 2000 because it's played them. I believe that's the only time we've played them twice in the same season ever, which is kind of interesting based on how many times that we've played and then the length of time that we've been in the same conference. But I think you got to go whatever hero you're going to assign for 2000 over Baker. I hear your points for Baker, but I mean the significance of those games, I think trumps the emotional significance, but the emotional and then national relevance of those games. Although I just gave a speech a second ago about how national relevance maybe isn't everything.
Right. So sadly, Ty. Well, no, I almost said it was one of two times, but we didn't play him in what I think is the worst moment OU ever had: the 2003 Big 12 championship game against K-State. I know we've had bad ones. We could talk about 2012 with Colin Klein, 14 also with that was not Colin Klein at that point. It was another large white man that I do not remember.
It was a really random name.
Yeah,
it was like a very generic name, like Jack something. I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah,
Jake Waters. Jake Waters.
Oh,
yes, and
geez.
he just was. Tyler is essentially Tyler Lockett's just medium. Is really what it was.
It was a pass. It was just passing to Tyler Lockett, and then I mean it was we went through some tough times there in the late 2010s, but it didn't get any worse than OU #1 in 2003 getting absolutely demolished in the Big 12 championship. Darren Sproles, the Charger legend, completely running ragged over the undefeated #1 Sooners. Some consider them the best team of all time, got absolutely smacked, and they never really recovered from it entering that national championship against LSU. A total black eye on what was an incredible team. To me, that's the darkest, deep, just worst moment. Arguably one of the worst moments in Stoops' run. But it's the worst moment of this series by far.
Yeah, that was a gross way to end that season. Momentum's such a big thing. It really is. Not a lot of people can do what TCU did this past season, where they lose their Big 12 championship game and can turn around and come out, and show some fight. You see it all the time, even like in other sports. Momentum in terms of postseason, one of the biggest things. In football, you really don't see it often, where a team loses and then they get the opportunity to play on the big stage. Not really too common. But you'll see like March Madness in basketball, those teams who get hot at the end of the season usually do well. And the teams that are kind of sputtering off continue to sputter off.
Yeah, it just...
And don't even get me started about that LSU game. I don't even think we need to talk about that.
I'm telling you, if Jason White didn't overthrow Kewan Jones, it's a totally different situation. It's a totally different situation. But we won't...
Well, we got plenty. I think we're going to do a whole episode on LSU coming up next year. But I think to roll it back to K-State, I did have, a little bit of gray area outside of the Big 12. But I do want to mention OU's greatest victory over K-State, which was in 1942 when an OU team. No, listen, because this is funny because OU ultimately went 3-5-2, and we tied Oklahoma A&M. We got destroyed by Tulsa. We lost to Texas 7-0. We came out, we kind of beat Kansas. We lost to Nebraska. We came out, we kind of beat Iowa State as in one touchdown. We tied Missouri. We lost at Temple, and we lost to William and Mary. and we never scored more than 25 points all season until Kansas State came down to Norman and something snapped and we put up 76 on them and went 76 and shut them out. So in a year where OU was just could barely get the ball down the field and could not beat anyone, just for some reason K-State came to town and we went 76-0 on them.
Woof.
And just to clarify, that K-State team in 1942 was also abysmal. They won also 3 games. So we were kind of just fighting for the bottom of the Big Six conference at the time.
I mean, you're right. That is a massive win. I will say, if we're talking about K-State and their futility, their garbage era, where they almost disbanded the football team era. The biggest win OU has over Kansas State isn't actually on the football field. It's in the 80s when Kansas State had a home game against OU and forfeited it to Norman because they realized that the money they would receive from OU hosting that game would be more than if Kansas State hosted that game. So they gave OU another home game.
Oh my God.
They gave up their home game against OU because they would make money. That is the biggest win, is Kansas State rolling over and just giving up because they knew they weren't going to win and they knew they weren't going to make as much money. So
yeah, I'm looking at it from 88 to 92. Every single game was played in Norman.
Yeah. Yeah, they just gave up. They gave up their home games. That's how bad it was in Kansas State before Bill Snyder showed up.
All right, I don't want to roast Kansas State too much here because I feel like they've had our number.
Right. Because they've actually been pretty good.
I will turn it back to just a random fact about K-State that truly has nothing to do with OU. But I think it's absolutely hilarious that K-State once played Nebraska in a Big 12 conference game in Tokyo.
Yep. No, there's a really good story behind that one.
Which is just guaranteed to never have a good time slot for anyone in the U.S.
Who is watching that game?
So
it was a pretty regular game, I think, wasn't it? Back in
the Tokyo Bowl. The Tokyo Bowl. So it's funny you bring that up because OU actually has a connection to that. So Nebraska tried to get OU, do a Tokyo Bowl with OU, but the OU got put on probation and could not play the game because they couldn't be televised. The probation it meant like OU can't be on TV whatsoever because that was a thing back in the day.
That's amazing. They should bring that punishment back, honestly.
Yeah, it's
that'd be a real punishment. Schools would be afraid of the revenue loss.
That would be put the real fear in the heart of.
Let them play in bowls. Let them play in bowls still, but it just can't be televised.
They're like we can't
what that would unleash.
They're like we can't play in Tokyo because they can't put it on TV. They're like they put it on tape delay, and they're like we can't do that. Like that's it kind of ruins the whole point of playing a game in Tokyo. So eventually they got their game against Nebraska, but weird other fact about the Tokyo Bowl.
OU did have a tie to that. Funny enough.
Yeah, they did. Weirdly enough, there's a great YouTube video by Jaguar Gator, which I know Ty, you've seen a couple of their stuff on it. But hilarious that Barry Switzer actually was the one who screwed him because of the cheating.
The time Barry Switzer sent Kansas State to Japan. That's my second favorite foreign football story behind the time that they wanted to play a college football game in Soviet Russia. But then they just ended up sending random high schoolers from Oklahoma to form composite teams. And then the Soviets just saw a weird Oklahoma high school, like all-star football game or something.
They just got to see Eufaula versus Seminole.
Basically, yeah.
Oof. That's hilarious. But no, K-State has had a wild, interesting history with OU, to say the least.
Yeah. Who are you as a fan looking back? Do you have kind of the most sour taste in your mouth? We talked about villains, Bobby, that we're going to kind of hit on now. Who is the guy? Is it Darren Sproles? Is it one of the Lockets? Is it Colin Klein? And maybe a Skylar Thompson? Who okay, I think you just said it right there. I was looking for a visceral reaction. I think Skylar Thompson just did it.
So Skylar Thompson is there. So K-State's weird because they produce Lockets and they produce like a weird amalgam of Colin Klein's. Like to me, Colin Klein and Skylar Thompson are like the same person. They're same like generic quarterback number 7. I'm pretty sure they both wore number 7 at one point. They do the same thing. They hurt you in the same ways, just like the Lockets just kind of keep coming out like a factory. That's the same way with Kansas State and these big old quarterbacks who just go in and kill you. And so I would have I have my biggest villain as the entire Lockett family, just the entire all of the Lockets, all of them, because they're the thing that makes that annoying is they're from Tulsa. So like they're Oklahomans. That's like Tyler
and have
Lockett,
allegiance to Oklahoma too. Like, you see Tyler Lockett tweeting all the time about how he loves the Thunder.
Exactly.
So it's like he has an allegiance to this state. It's not like we have these like Josh Jacobs where it's like he said, screw Oklahoma, I hate it here and I want to get outy. He likes it in Oklahoma.
We just screwed up the first Lockett. Ty, go for
I
it.
do want to point out, that's the biggest villain. I do want to point out a quick programming note on the Lockets. The next one is coming. We will only have to face him this year. But what's his name? Sterling.
Sterling Lockett. That's a
will be.
Oh no, we
will
don't have
be
to face him this year. We don't play him this season.
Yeah, we don't play Kansas State
unless it's a Big 12 championship.
No, we're not going to make it to that. Not with this team. So unless we make the right decision at quarterback. So I guess we dodged a bullet. But yeah, the next generation of the Lockets, they're like the royal family of Kansas State, but not really because that's the Snyder family. So
it looks like they're living in Stillwell, Kansas now, because that's where Sterling Lockett is from. So they've moved away from the Tulsa area.
Damn.
But is he?
No offense to Stillwell, Oklahoma, but that's kind of what I'm thinking Stillwell, Kansas is right now. And Stillwell, Oklahoma, I've been told, claims to be the meth capital of the world. So I don't know what Stillwell, Kansas is like, but that's what's in my brain.
I feel like Stillwell, Oklahoma is like close to the town that has been abandoned because they mined too much. I can't remember what there's a town in Oklahoma that has been completely abandoned because they did too much mining of it's like zinc or something. And it's I don't know, but it poisoned the entire town and nobody could live there anymore.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild.
I know someone from Stillwell, and then also 90 Day Fiance, there's a girl from Stillwell, Oklahoma on it. There's national, I can't believe we're talking about Stillwell, Oklahoma right now, but national people looking at Stillwell, Oklahoma right now, and it's just some girl on her farm, and they're like, okay, is this what Oklahoma is?
Is this farmer needs a bride or whatever?
No, but I watched 15
watched
minutes of the first episode and I said, oh no. I was obviously I had to check that out, but I could not watch that any longer. The first 15 minutes was brutal. Oh my God. There's a guy from Oklahoma there too.
Of course. Obviously, mention Darren Sproles. I think you have to also, if you mention Darren Sproles, you have to mention Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah,
absolute killer. Just small dudes, little shifty guys.
Because it's
out
the
here
same
kicking your
thing
ass.
over and over.
It's the same
that's
thing.
The overweening theme of Kansas State. It's like. The quarterbacks to wear number 7 that we thought were there for 8 years, but in actuality was just 2 quarterbacks, Skylar Thompson, Colin Klein. Like legitimately
like
that was
Jake
in our.
Fromm's.
And then Deuce Vaughn, yes, it's the Jake Fromm's that we used to. It's the actually real life version of that.
No, except that was this was
Colin
like
Klein
legitimate subterfuge. Like confusion.
And then
Will Howard is
small,
just Colin
quick
Klein
running
4.
backs, and then Lockett's legitimately they've had some other good players come through.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just off the top of my head, like Byron Pringle was there at the wide receiver. I mean, I'm thinking of just these are absolutely deep cuts right now. I'm just thinking of Kansas. Yes. I'm just thinking of deep cuts from Kansas State. But they've had some other players, but those ones will always be ingrained in my brain. just because I feel like I'm really poor at figuring out, hey, this thing happened in this year. That's like one of my worst things on sports knowledge. I'm so bad at it. Kansas State makes it so much worse because I don't know what happened when. All of it is the same.
I think K-State is easier. It's like K-State, like we just talked about with their football players, like all the quarterbacks just being basically the same dude with the same number, all the lockets. It's like when you're making a password for some sort of new account and you just like change the numbers at the start of your password, but like the main password stays the same and you're just changing a handful of things. That's basically what it is.
You just
if you put them into like the plagiarism checker, it would come out like at least 75% plagiarism for each player.
Yeah, it's just like password 1. Oh, password 1 expired. Password 2. There you go.
Yeah.
That'll solve it.
Just add another number at the end of the password.
It's like your OUNet ID. You just,
Oh my God, you had to reset your damn
password
every like 2 months.
They make you reset your password like every year. So naturally, the number in the password is just whatever year it is, because you have to keep doing that.
No, it got worse. It was way more than 1 year.
I think it was 6 months.
It was like every couple of months, at least for me recently. And I was out of passwords. It was at the point where I was on password number 7. I was like, I can't do anything anymore. They're not letting me do the same number 4 times in a row. I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I concede.
Oh my God. That's hilarious. All right, let's wrap this thing up with a simple question.
Yes.
Are you guys going to miss this team? And if so, what are you going to miss about them? Ty?
I'll take it. So yes, I think relevance and just caring about the team. So I'll make this argument of there's a lot of teams that I'm excited for OU to play regularly. I think I've touched on pretty frequently. Like I'm excited for us potentially to have a new sort of in the box rivalry with LSU. I think that would be really cool, really relevant, and some other stuff. But like I don't care if OU plays. Like I would almost rather not that I'm like afraid of them, but like are adding Arkansas and Missouri to the schedule regularly. Like, is that cool? I don't think so. Some people might if they have a tie. I would rather play K-State than Arkansas or Missouri any day of the week. So
it's a bold take.
I mean, even if we lost every time we played them, it's still like I don't care. Like Arkansas and Missouri don't deserve, even with OU being abysmal, like they don't even deserve to be in the SEC, let alone playing OU. Like it doesn't make sense. Like if we're gonna move,
Missouri,
for big brands, I don't see it with Arkansas.
Arkansas
what is fun about
up.
Arkansas?
They're
picking. Oh, they're on the up and up.
Yeah, the Waltons are just funneling everything into the Hogs. Like the Arkansas makes sense.
Great value Hogs.
I'll support Arkansas if Walmart strong arms like the SEC to get Arkansas like fully just consumer, like fully like sponsored out. Like if Arkansas has like a little,
they're
like
already.
A little, no, but I mean like
getting
full,
to it.
Like they have a little tiny Razorback on the helmet, and then it's just mostly Walmart logo. Like I want them to look like a NASCAR out there. Then also
honestly, I would not be surprised if we get there in like 10, 15 years. But like, look at their basketball team, what they had last year from recruiting standpoint.
Yeah.
It's the NIL with football. It's getting there with the Waltons. The Arkansas is going to be like a scary future.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
cannot describe to you how little I care about Arkansas college basketball.
They got like 3 5-star recruits. They got the number 1 overall recruit in the nation that honestly flopped, but still, that's. And they just had an absolutely ridiculous. And then the transfer portal, they got like an amazing amount of quality players from there, because that means money. They had a lot of money to give out to get those players going there. In football, you don't see those effects as quickly because obviously you have 22 starters, not including special teams, and you only have 5 in basketball. So the effects come a lot quicker in a smaller sport. But I would not be surprised if Arkansas continues to get better recruits and more transfer portal guys, and you can see the money start to work.
I really hope that there's a K-State fan listening and watching to this, and we got to the point where it's like, will you miss this team? We talked about it for like 30 seconds and then immediately started talking about
all right. Okay. I'll bring it back. I'll reel it back
Let me finish mine. I will
Okay.
very much miss K-State because I think it's old school, regional, relevant to the true fans, good product on the field college football. I will very much miss that, and I will very much miss getting to play a team that OU has so many rich ties through personnel and just history with. So yes, K-State will be missed.
I'm on the border with it, to be completely honest with y'all. I will reminisce on K-State. There will be times where I'll be like, yeah, I remember those times, have the good memories, but I don't think I'm going to actively miss them to the point where I'm just sitting there like, damn, I wish we were playing K-State this season, like good opponent, obviously a lot of laurels and a lot of history and a lot of connections, like you were saying, Ty. But it's not like in the same conversation as, like Oklahoma State will be. Like, I will genuinely miss Bedlam. And TCU, I will miss TCU. But after that, it gets to the point where do I really miss many Big 12 teams? I will reminisce, but I don't know if I can miss them.
And I agree with you in a weird way because it's like we've had, and I mean, when we're talking about best games, the most recent one, the one we really can talk about is in 2000 when OU was the underdog. Kansas State has always kind of been like pesky, a thorn in your side. You don't look forward to having them come to town, and you aren't celebrating when you beat them. They are pesky, annoying, and I do admire that about them. They're fun. They have a cool brand. The Wabash Cannonball, super cool if you've ever been there. They have a cool tradition. Their mascot's creepy, as we've established. Very weird.
I like Willie.
Willie is weird. Why does he have human? Why does he have human arms? Willie should not have human arms. Kansas State should afford, like, I don't know, a gray sleeve or something.
Isn't the Wabash Cannonball? Isn't the history behind that like their thing burned down and that was the only? See, that's just like Willie. We completely. That's also poverty tier, like Willie referenced to our earlier. But like they couldn't afford new music or just.
Their music,
fire extinguishers
the music building. The music building burned down the night before homecoming
because they couldn't afford fire extinguishers and building to code.
It was in like the 30s.
Yeah, people built to code in the 30s. There are buildings on OU's campus from the 30s that did not burn down.
Yeah, I mean, look.
I like how we're sitting here like Oklahoma, like in Kansas. Like we're Oklahoma. Like we're essentially grouped into the same little like blob of by national like people not from the area. People think Oklahoma.
We have a professional sports team. We have a professional sports team and much more negative national headlines.
Have y'all ever been
Kansas?
is
just
they don't have Joe Exotic either.
But I was gonna say they
reel us back in, Bobby, please.
I was going to say they don't have that. Well, they have Chiefs fanatic, but he's a Tulsan, so that doesn't work.
Oh, they do have the Chiefs. Yeah, I forgot they do have a pro team.
Have you ever been to Manhattan, Kansas? Though it's like it's out there, man. You're like it's not exactly like KC, And I do love Kansas State. Like it's a fun town. Like Aggieville, they have the bar district down perfect. Like that is a awesome college bar, like district. They have I believe when I went there, they would have 50-cent wells on Wednesdays. For some reason, they would refer to 16-ounce beers as pounders. Made no sense, but it was kind of fun. They're just really endearing.
Do you really? Never mind.
But pounders, because it's a pound, 16 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I don't know, man.
How many times did you get pounded in the Little Apple?
Oh, I got pretty pounded, boys. I got pretty pounded.
Sorry, I'm going off the rails.
Yeah, they have cool tailgating. They have a cool like atmosphere. I will miss that. I will genuinely miss that. I'm not going to miss having to deal with them. Those pesky Pounders. Farmer dudes and I don't know, weird wildcat-headed men. But I'll miss them a little bit. So I'll say yes. I'll say yes.
Oh yes, you've turned your answer. You were with me, and now you are against me.
It's a kind of. The answer is a kind of. If we played them in like 10 years, and it's like, hey, OUK State, then it's like, okay, I kind of miss you. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. I think I would miss K-State after some time.
Mm-hmm.
But
I figured you'd say yes in the end.
Yeah, because I've been to Manhattan a couple times. That's one of the
I bet Bobby says yes to every single team.
I was thinking
That's
about that, and I think there's 2 on my list that I'm not sure of, but everything else, yes.
I've done a lot of these notes already because I did them on the plane and I was really bored. There are not a lot of yeses. There are not a lot of yeses.
Wow. But
This is-
did you originally have this one as a no?
I flipped it.
Oh, here we go.
Ooh.
All it takes is a 40-minute podcast episode. Just
My-
so much about this idea.
So my original answer to this that I've written on my notes was absolutely the hell not.
Oh my god, that is like, could that be
Yeah.
any more absolute?
Well, I
Than what you
was
just
only
said
thinking
there.
about football, and then I started thinking about the Pounders. I started thinking about, the Wabash Cannonball. Now I feel worse if they gave me a Wabash Cannon dog. That weird hot dog they.
Oh, that was
they-
a weird one.
But that's the Big 12's fault. So, anyways, all right. Well, guys, I think that's all the reminiscence we have on Kansas State. Any final words before we say goodbye?
Goodbye, Kansas State.
Bye, Willie. I hope you find relevancy wherever you go, Willie. Bye. Ty, any final words?
Yeah, I had just a very, very Big Ten team in the Big 12 without the academics or the student body of like 100,000 undergrad freshmen. So I don't, RIP K-State forever will be nationally irrelevant now as the best purple team in the Big 12, but irrelevant conference.
They were always the best purple. Well, no, that's not
I was
true.
about to say, I don't know.
Well, hey, TCU didn't win the Big 12 though, so
yeah.
Kansas State right now best purple team in the conference.
Mhm.
Michigan didn't even lose to the best
And
purple
Kansas
team.
State did have a better basketball team than TCU too, and that's the only
That's
2 sports
true.
that we really care about.
That's true.
Academically
That's true.
stronger.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of. All right, I think that's where we're going to wrap this one up. Thank y'all so much for listening. We're going to have a lot more of these. Okay, a lot might be a lot. Just 7 more. We don't need to recap Texas. We're going with them.
No.
But look, we're excited. If you're watching this on YouTube, share your favorite memories of K-State. We'd love to see them in the comments. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting app, make sure to give us 5 stars because we've deserved it. I think we did good. Look, it's the off season. We're struggling. Give us some 5 stars to boost our ego. Okay. We need it. Anyways, for me, Jameson and Ty, this has been Bye Big 12. Remembering Kansas State. Until next time, have a good one. Boomer Sooner, and goodbye, Kansas State. We'll kind of miss